May 20th, 2003. Today, however, on the first day here, we're going to meet up with Neil Mindrum, who happened to be with me when we had a Bigfoot encounter in the Catskills of New York. In 1982, we were traveling to the anti-nuke rally in New York City that year, and happened to continue driving on and had a late night encounter with a Bigfoot. Neil was one of the first people in my life to come up with the idea that the present moment is infinite. We're meeting here in Cedarville, Ohio, at the Williamson Indian Mound, and we're moving on later today, hopefully, to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base for the 35th reunion, 35th anniversary, 35th anniversary of my Tommy and I we're meeting up for the 35th anniversary of the vision that Tommy and I had of the Twin Towers, the precognition of 911. Why Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, you ask? Well, it's well known that it's a well-known tale that the crashed saucer from Roswell, 1947, was brought to Wright-Patterson and is stored there in Hangar 18, along with various other alien accoutrements. Whether you believe that or not, it's up to you, but it seemed like a good spot to meet and commemorate the 911 precog. And I told earlier, I mentioned to the folks out there that you and I were together in the Catskills on Bear Mountain when we encountered
1982.
We encountered something in the forest, and as I've read more and more about the Bigfoot, I'm starting to feel like that's what that was. What do you think?
We'd been driving for a great deal of time, so we pulled over. Thank you. And we decided we were going to crash in some sort of a dirt road. Or we pulled off in this area.
Was the Bear Mountain National Park or State Park?
I believe so. We had sleeping bags in the trunk. Andy pulled the sleeping bags out. We started to kind of create somewhere that would be fairly comfortable to catch some sleep. Before long, we heard twigs snapping. Andy felt the presence. He became unsettled, and that kind of bothered me, so we got out of there.
I had that spine-tingling chill that I rarely get. And it's just a presence. It seems very different than if it was just a prankster or a deer. So really in intense, terrifying fear. It was sort of like the fear that you get on Woodward Drive if you go back there. If you were to drive back there with me tonight, we were to go to the spot where the energy field is, you'd feel it. You'd feel the terror.
Don't stop thinking about the Sasquatch. Don't stop. He will soon be here. He will be here. Hairier than before. Yesterday's gone. Yesterday's gone.
Here we are at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, outside of Hangar 18, where the supposed alien landing ship from Roswell is stored. Talk about the armed guards and then talk about how we got in here. We actually drove a couple of back roads. We went through a couple of unauthorized fences and to get in here.
The armed guards, one was Caucasian. He was actually the more feisty, if you will, of the two. And we had to tell him, we used the excuse that we were vendors, and we were able to gain entrance that way. And here we are. I'm a little nervous.
Because if you go any closer than this, there's signs that say you'll be shot.
No questions asked.
Do you think that there really was a crash saucer at Roswell?
Well,
You've read most of the literature on it, right?
I've read a lot of the literature, but I would say there was.
You think that was a real saucer?
Yeah. I think, of course, there's a German technology, you know, that we're still kind of gaining an understanding of what the Germans were trying to do.
Right.
And now if it were alien aircraft, I don't know about that. I'd say it was man-made. That's my take on it.
It's the 35th anniversary of
The precog?
mine and Tommy's 911 precognition. And we're at Wright-Patterson here again, Ohio.
June 20th. Excuse me, May
Most
20th.
tightly secured Air Force base in the country. This is where the command headquarters of the Air Force is. That's where most of the records, Blue Book records, all the suppressed records of UFO research have been housed. So it's a big day for us here.
Do you think there's any relationship between the location of Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and the Sasquatch sightings in Loveland, Ohio?
Well, you know, Ohio has the most Sasquatch sightings of any state, so I mean, who knows what the connection is. Hope to date that the Air Force switched commanders 5 days before 9/11. You see right there at the end, he's one of the military advisors to the president. They would have had to have had the Air Force commander in on an inside job on 9/11. So maybe that's plus the Global Hawk technology.
Good thought.
We also saw the Global Hawk technology here at the Air Force Museum that allows civilian planes to be flown remotely. They probably had to get rid of the previous Air Force commander because he didn't want to go along with the plan. What do you think?
Sounds plausible.
Do you have any books on the UFO UFOs supposed to be kept here at the Air Force Base? Roswell?
Nope.
No.
Nothing.
No books on any of that stuff?
I don't think so. If they did, they'd be in the space section.
Where's that?
It's right in the end. I don't think so.
My dad is interested in it. He's right behind me.
Here's.
This guy. He's my dad.
Yes, we do. Yes.
Look at this. What do you think, Dad?
Well, son,
And anything else we?
do you think your mother would be interested in if I were to spend her hard-earned cash on this?
Thank you. Neil's holding the official mascot of the Air Force. It's a Mothman, a young Mothman. His words. Ivy League, you see that too.
What does your future hold? Do you have the desire to make a difference?
Hey, just to give some perspective here on the location of this church and how it plays into the Mothman sightings here at Tommy's and Harriet's, just to give you a better sense of it. If we pull ahead here a little bit, we could see the church. There's the church. And then up on the hill there in those trees is Tommy's house. And then right here used to be Mrs. Atkins' house, who seemed to know what was going on in terms of saying to us, those lights that you're seeing are beneficial or angels or whatever. And here's the road itself. Now right up there, once you get under the canopy there, just sort of right about here, let's see, where's my finger? That's where I had my sighting of the elemental. And that's basically where the basketball court is. On the left here you see the basketball court. Tommy's house is right up here in the, beyond the trees. And this would be the spot where I saw my elemental. Okay, I'm in front of Tommy's house. I'm going to walk up the driveway here. We didn't do that before because Harriet was afraid, but we're going to walk up here and we're going to check out the Mothman Shrine tool shed. and Tommy's house. Here we go. So this yard here, this would be where the UFO supposedly landed, right here. There's the tool shed where the shrine was. Okay, the view from the church over toward the lane, Woodrum's Lane there, you can see Mrs. Atkins' house. And right up here would be where I saw the elemental. I'm not quite sure what this is about. We are now moving forward to speak with my sister, and she's going to talk about her recent Mothman sighting inside her bedroom, and also about a variety of other things that are related, earlier sightings that she's had, and psychic things. Yeah, go.
Okay, about 2 years ago, over my bed all night was this hovering, dark, winged looking something. And I wasn't really afraid, I don't think. I didn't have this fear of it, but it was there all night. And I didn't sleep all night. It was like, and I stayed in my bed, and I just was like looking at it, I think. And then the sun came up, and then it was not there, but things like that. What else?
How long did that last? All night? Hours?
Hours, maybe 4 or 5 hours.
This was a couple of years ago?
Yeah,
In this house?
yeah. And then my grandfather Ed, he comes to visit me.
Well, you have to explain a little bit.
Um,
He's no longer with us.
oh yes.
Right.
I had a psychic tell me 10 years ago that there was someone who had died but had not went on yet because they felt a real strong connection to me. And she was looking at my palm, and she said his name starts with E. And I said, well, that must be Grandpa Ed, because I was real close to him. I was like his shadow for years. She said, well, then that's who it is. And she said, he won't go on until you die. He's waiting for you. He's staying around to like help you through things. And the night of my car crash, I remember there was a real strong smell of gasoline, and people were running around the vehicle saying her bike's broke, but how are we going to get her out, because they were afraid the gas was going to ignite and it was going to blow us up. So I remember at that point asking somebody for help. It was like a prayer maybe or something. And the next thing I knew, I was like outside the vehicle, but no one there ever said they moved me, because I asked around, because I never could figure out how I got out of the automobile, but I felt like it. Later, the psychic told me this like 4 years after the wreck. So I've always felt like that Grandpa Ed got me somehow out of the vehicle. And he has also come to me at night. First I would think I was dreaming, but it was not really like a dream. I can't really explain it, but maybe 3 times in the last 6-7 years he's came in this house. Yes, in this house. And it was always usually under really times I was really stressed, or I was sick or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
or I had a really big problem it was really weighing on my mind. Okay, what else?
Let's go back to the thing in the room, though, the dark thing. Did you ever see it? I mean, can you describe it a little more? You said, did you actually...
It was big, like as big as my bed, maybe. It like encompassed the whole area over my bed. And it seems like it had...
Did you see a face? Did it have a head? Arms? I mean, what?
It wasn't really arms, it's more like wings, big wings, maybe.
Uh-huh. And they were spread out?
Yeah. Flat, it looked like it was like pressed flat against the ceiling. I can't remember.
Eyes? Did it have eyes?
Seems like it might have had eyes, but it seems like it was maybe looking at me, but I can't really remember the eyes so much. As the wings were the biggest part of its body, so that's probably why it sticks out in my mind, the wings. The
So-
wings were the more menacing part of its body. Maybe that's why.
So other parts of the body maybe weren't as menacing?
Right. And smaller. The wings were the biggest thing on the... You know how a butterfly's body is smaller and slender,
Mm-hmm.
but it has the wings are so big? Sort of like that.
Mm-hmm. Did you get any messages from it, or did you communicate with it? Because you
Not that I
'cause
realized.
most
We have-
people would be really scared.
No, I don't really get afraid of things anymore. I have a lot of odd things happen that I don't normally tell people because they think, you're not quite right.
Well, most people will just assume that was some kind of a dream, or
Well, it wasn't a dream because the sun came up and I'm still laying there. So,
if you weren't afraid, why didn't you go to sleep? So I mean, you stayed awake for some
I don't
reason.
know, maybe I was, it seemed like we were having, it's like we were looking at each other's face, but nobody was really saying anything, and I'm not sure why I kept staring. Maybe we were communicating some way, and I just don't realize it. Maybe.
So when you say face, what kind of face was it?
Well, I don't remember. Just it was a dark form mostly, and in the dark, it's hard to see.
So you were just looking where the face would be.
Yeah. Well, you could tell by its the wings where its face would be.
But did you feel like you were just, there was nothing you could do because it was over you and it was...
Yeah, maybe. But I wasn't really afraid.
So you had to sort of just give into it, right? I mean, if you had fought it...
Well, I sort of like interaction with things that aren't explained. So I would probably, being curious like I am, I would probably stay there because I wouldn't want to miss something.
Right.
So it doesn't scare me.
Did anything happen the day before or the day after?
I can't remember that. Now, when my grandfather comes around, it's always during really stressful times, but I can't remember this creature type, whatever it was. I can't remember any stress involved.
Have you seen any other creatures? Because I remember once you said you saw black panthers, which of course don't exist in North America, but I remember you saying as kids...
Well, other people saw it. So
other people saw it.
Oh yeah, Mr. Hughes, remember?
Mr. Hughes?
Remember the man across the street, the little old guy? He saw it.
Got it.
But as I recall back then, it was a common knowledge among the people right in that area, because we could hear it and see it late evenings. It wasn't just me.
Because the Black Panther is it's a mythological being. I mean, they don't really exist. Black Panthers don't exist in North America. Only mountain lions. Only mountain lions are small mountain cats, but they're not black. And
This was definitely black.
It's like seeing a big black thing over your bed. It's along the same lines.
Well, this panther screamed like a woman. That's why we all knew it was a panther. Everybody said it was a panther.
Mm.
I have a feeling that I have a cat nature.
Mhm.
I'm not sure what that means exactly, but like maybe twice,
I would say that's
or
true.
maybe 3 times, I've had a feeling that maybe I was transported not into more of a cat-like. It's almost like I left my body for a while, and then I was a cat.
Mm-hmm.
And I also, I even clawed myself. I had claw marks.
Did
That
you?
other people saw my claw marks. In fact, Craig, the guy that's coming in next week, he could tell you about the one night that it scared him because I was like clawing myself, and he was trying to restrain me, I guess. But then he just went away and left me alone. He said. And then I headbutted somebody one time who was trying to restrain me when I was in the cat-like thing. That was David. Remember my boyfriend I have. Somehow I think it might be tied into a sexual thing. think I was about 12 or 13. I'm 56 now. One night I woke up because I heard a noise that sounded like a swooshing sound, sort of. So I got up and I looked out the window up into the wooded area. And there was like a space in front that was, it was sort of cleared. I guess Dad had cleared that or something. But there was something sitting there. And it had lights around the center portion, a ring sort of. And the whooshing noise seemed like to be, when the lights went around, there was a point where it either gained momentum or, how do I explain it? The whooshing was like a whoo, whoo, and it was somehow connected to the lights. The lights made the whoosh sound. It was either sounded like it was gearing up to take off or it was powering down to some other thing. I don't know. That's the type of sound it was.
Were there color changes?
Yeah, there was colors in the lights as it went around.
Did they change? Or did they stay the same?
I think they stayed the same, but they were like in blocks. I mean, they were different. As the light went around, the different colors sort of came out more than maybe the color right before or after it. It was kind of but the most...
When it came to your vision, it got brighter because it sort of was facing you, and it went on around.
Well, that could be true. Yeah, that's probably true. The thing I remember the most was the sound, though. It had a really odd sound. It was kind of a squashed down, sort of eggish figure. I don't think it was really like perfectly round, like a circle or something. It was more like and I don't remember legs or anything that maybe it stood on. It was just sort of over the ground. And I stood there for, I don't know how long, and then that's all. I mean, that's all I remember of the night. I don't remember anything else, whether I went outside or anything.
So you were looking out the window?
Yeah.
Did you?
And that's...
You didn't think to calling anyone else to look at it, or?
No. But I normally don't do that when I see things.
So, all you have is the memory of looking out. You don't remember the beginning of it or the end of it?
Just the hearing. I was asleep, just the hearing of the noise, getting up to see what the noise was, and standing staring at the lights that were making the noise, and that's it.
Any did you get any feelings from it?
Not that I remember.
Were you afraid?
I don't think so.
So that would have been what year?
12 or 13. Okay, I was born 46, 56, 57, 50, maybe 60s, early 60s, late 50s, something like that. And I don't know if you remember, I lived on my bedroom was like on the opposite end in that little, from everybody else. See, remember the main house was like, and for some reason they put me on the other end of the house away from everybody.
Right next to the landing area.
Exactly. I was in the little room on the opposite end, and the little walkway type of thing till you got to the room. So I was banished out there by myself on the other side.
Okay, one of the things that you're probably not going to, you may not remember this, but I remember as a kid you saying that there were actually little green men in the house. Do you remember that?
I don't remember that.
See, as a kid, I remember that very distinctly.
I told you that?
I remember it very distinctly, and then I remember people making fun of you for saying it. So then I think what happened was you just it became clear that it was just not something that you'd want to talk about.
Maybe that's why I don't tell people now, and why I'm not really wanting to talk on this right now. Let's see what else. So many
other psychic phenomenon that you have going on.
I always, constantly, even on a daily basis, have feelings about things. I have a lot of dreams about people. Did I ever tell you about how I woke up the morning that Grandpa Ed died.
Mm-mm.
Okay, I woke up that morning.
I might have to restart the tape. I'm running out of tape, so
Okay, so
you got 1 minute.
Well, I wrote the morning that my grandfather passed away. I woke up that morning. I don't remember my age. I was young, and I knew I had this overwhelming need to go and tell him something. There was something I needed to tell him right then because I knew he was going to be dead before the day was up. And I did not go because, well, you know, you're afraid. You don't understand what, you know, back then. Now today I would go do it. But he was
you were
dead
in your
by
mid-20s.
He
You were in your mid-20s
what
then.
was it? Well, he was dead by, 5 or 6 o'clock that evening, and I still have this nagging thing that there's something really important that I was supposed to tell him or he was supposed to tell me, and I didn't get to do it.
Maybe
So
that's why he's still around.
Could be. That could be. Just thought of that. Now, there was a time in Dunbar when I was married to Glenn, and I had that dark figure appear that night. Have I told you about that? Over the years, there's been so many unexplained. I don't know.
Tell me about that one.
Okay. I was asleep in bed. This was probably 1977, 78. Not this house, a little house in Dunbar. I woke because there seemed to be lights in my eyes. And at first I thought it was a car light, but there's no car lights, there's no windows on that particular side. So I'm opening my eyes, and something's really bright and it's getting bigger. The light gets really big, and I'm like staring. I was frightened of this, whatever it was, but this was also years ago. Now I'm not frightened of things. I've got accustomed to it, maybe. And there was a robed figure, and this looked more like a man than a bat, than a winged figure. And he seemed to be a hooded type of thing. Okay. This was when this time of my life, I was having a struggle with good and evil somehow in my person. This was when I was having a really spiritual, there was a fight within me between which way to go, one way or the other. And I'm not sure if this is related, but it was in the same time that all that was going on. And I was really afraid of this. And I remember my husband at the time was laying there, and I was like, and he wouldn't wake up, no matter what I did. So I laid there all night, a long time, terrified with, like this, without being able to move, like paralyzed. And this hooded thing, standing there as close as, 3 feet. It was like if I could put my hand out, I would have touched it. And I kept laying there with what seemed like hours, and it seems like birds started, when it starts to get dawn, how the birds start waking up and started. And it seems like the last thing I remember was the birds started, and then this thing, whatever it was. And all the time, this light was sort of behind him, which made him stand out more, okay? All of a sudden, the whole thing just diminishes again, like it came up. It goes down to a ball, sort of a light again. It just goes right down the way it came right back up. And I still laid there for a long time, and I was asking my husband, why wouldn't you wake up? And he's like oblivious. But I could not wake him up. I kicked as much as I could without getting I was terrified. That was the worst thing that I've seen. That was the most terrified I've ever been. After that, nothing scared me ever as bad as that.
What color skin did it have?
I don't think I could really see the face. It was more like the hood was like, you know what I mean? The hood was like over. And it looked like a man. It didn't look like a creature, but it was scary. So it was something demonic or something.
This is the other thing that happened a week later from the other
Well, it was
thing?
around that time. I don't know if it was in like a 2-week period. It was when I wanted to go back. I wanted to get closer to God again, and I didn't want to be. My husband was drank, and I wanted to get away from that stuff. So I'm having a real struggle within myself to be better, to do what I know I should do but don't do. You know what I'm saying? So it was in that time period. Well, I was laying on the couch watching TV, and just all of a sudden, these two hands were around my neck, squeezing my neck. It was two hands. I felt the fingers. It was two hands, and I remember from church how they used to say, when demons are around or something like that. And since that was my mindset at the time, I'd been thinking about things like that. The first thing I did was I jumped up on my feet, I remember, and there's these two cold hands around my neck, and I remember using Christ's name because that's what I'd been thinking about, really. So that was my first thing that came out of my mouth, and it was audible. I said it out loud, and as soon as I did that, whatever it was left me. But that happened right around the same time as I saw the robed figure, and I think it was some type of demon activity I don't know whether they were trying to scare me to do one thing or another thing. I never knew what the purpose was, but it did happen about the same time.
One of the other people I've been talking to in this documentary his name's Kenny Elton, and he talks a lot about Christ imagery and also about how when you see something like that, it's an extension of your unconscious. It's your unconscious mind making an image for you to learn from.
What was I learning from the cold hands around my neck?
I don't know.
To be scared to death?
I don't know. What happened after that? Did you make any change? I mean, did it cause you to get closer to God?
I got better after that. Maybe the fear itself made me get better. Maybe that was the point. You know, sometimes fear makes us do differently. Some people, the fear of death might make them better people. I mean, maybe that's what it was.
But you know, it's not completely your unconscious. It's your unconscious mixing with something out there. I mean, it's all from inside it, really. But like on Woodward Drive, for instance, there are locations where the energy is stronger.
That's where I want to go.
There's more magnetism, or there's more, you know, the rocks around West Virginia are very magnetic, and there's a lot of lightning. And that magnetism from the lightning gets stored in the rocks, and also pipelines by the church.
So the metal.
The energy in that pipeline, the magnetism in that pipeline connected our house with Harriet's and Tommy's.
Oh, that's kind of cool.
So I mean, any vision that you might see on Woodrum's Lane, you might also see at our house, if it were
My hair's
by the
standing up.
magnetism.
Wait a minute. Okay. I'm trying to think of some other things.
But I wanted to ask you, how has your worldview changed? I mean, at that time you were using Christian teachings. How would you describe your worldview now? I mean, are you still a Christian, or has it become wider?
Whatever we think that word means. I still, at this point in my life, I still have a really strong love for some entity. Now, everybody calls it something different, I feel, as I've gotten older. I think there's a lot of people that have the same love for, he's pounding, of course, the same love for someone. Maybe it's a love of your creator or something that's sort of instilled in all of us. Whether we follow and do what we should or not, I think we still have that somewhere. now. I still have that really strong. I mean, I can well up for no reason because I'm feeling this great love for the Creator, this person, this whoever, you know, type of thing. But I know I'm still not doing right. I'm not helping anybody. I'm still in my little box that I don't like to venture out of.
Maybe the path of the healer is a path for you to reach out, to get to.
Maybe.
I know for me, I can go to a Christian church now and cry. I can go see a service, and I totally understand that other people are seeing it a certain way. They're seeing it through a Christian way, but I'm seeing it more, you know.
But you can do that even by yourself, sitting out under a tree. I mean,
Absolutely.
I do that a lot.
That's the path of Shiva in Buddhism. That's the path to God. That's someone who you're yearning for God.
Yeah.
That's one of the three traditional paths you can take.
But I don't feel that my life here is worthwhile, that I've learned what I was supposed to learn this time. I don't feel like I have. What? That got a spark out of you. What was that all about? I feel I'm probably going to have to come back again because I didn't get it this time. And
do you want to come back?
Yeah, probably. And my knowing that I'm not doing it right is even worse, I think, because I realize this. I feel I'm going to be held more accountable maybe because I know this and I haven't made some great change to change myself. I don't affect anybody because I just stay by myself. So how am I doing any good for anything?
Well, in the Buddhist world, none of that's important. All that's important is that you come to know yourself.
Well, I've done that, I think.
No.
But I spent the first half of my life, I feel like I was a better person. I did things for people back then. But as I got older and I had a lot of really bad things happen to me, I got really pissed, I think. Well, it seems like I had too many tragedies, too many bad things. I looked around at other people, I didn't see them having quite as many. So I was really pissed for a while. Then I changed from one extreme to the other. I went from helpful, always sort of going along with people. If somebody wanted me to do, okay, I wouldn't say no. Now I've changed. I've become, I'm going to do
but
whatever.
Why is that any worse than the other? I mean, how is that?
Something in me tells me that that's not a good thing to do.
Right?
I don't know. As I'm getting more towards my own death, I feel like I should have done should be doing something better than what I'm doing. Does it really have to do with doing, or does it have to do with a state of mind that you'd rather be in? I don't know. Don't you think we humans are here to be of some service?
We're here to know God, or we're here to know ourselves, or we're here to find out something.
We're here to, what's the Bible say? Fellowship with God. So maybe you're right. It just dawned on me. We were put here for fellowship with Him, maybe not necessarily to do good to all the other people.
In reality, we are God. In reality, we are the cosmic sea, right? We somehow, for some reason, and this is the big question of philosophy and religion, why do we suddenly go into human bodies and have all of this have all of these things, apparently physical things going on? What is the purpose of that? Well, there is some purpose, and we don't know what it is, but it's to fellowship with yourself. It's like,
well, why?
it's a pretty unanswerable
I don't know.
question.
Jesus took human form. Why? To feel pain, to feel things, to feel emotions, to feel love for other people. So that's why we have human bodies, maybe. Maybe that's the only way we can do it. Maybe. Pain teaches you things of itself. Teaches you patience, teaches you how to endure. There's purposes for everything. I don't think anything happens for, like, coincidence. I think everything is there for a reason. You doing this right now is for some reason that might affect me later. I don't know yet.
Okay, here we are, 2003, Charleston, West Virginia. Last year we didn't get much footage with Sharon, but she was there when Harriet and I went to the visit Woodward there at midnight, and we saw the energy field. And we thought it would be good to have Sharon recap what she experienced that night.
Where do we start?
I remember the first thing was we started walking up the hill, and you started feeling have heavy breathing, and your necklace started burning.
Yeah, I wore my necklace. I wore my crystal necklace, and I had no idea where you were wanting to get to as far as the place that was supposed to be something. But about halfway up the hill, I started my chest, where my gemstone was hanging. I started feeling a little heat there, and then I was having trouble breathing. A lot of times when I'm doing tarot cards or anything, when something when I start feeling the energy or start picking up on other things, I get short of breath, get shaky, jittery. That usually means something's going on. But I started feeling that way, and as we got up to close to this clearing that was over to the left, I saw something dart across the road. It was more like a shadow type thing. It didn't really have a shape. It was just something I saw, that moved. And then further up the road, I could see like these wispy, they weren't going this way, they were up and down. Almost like figures, but again, not with really a shape, just tall, slender things.
Was it like a shimmery veil?
No, they were separate. Be like maybe 3 people standing up the road, and there was like something kind of glowing white, wispy in front. And it was kind of...
So you saw 3 figures with something in front of them?
Yeah, the shadow moved across, and that's what made me look. And then when I looked past that, it was like there were wispy figures of some type. I couldn't really make out a definite...
Okay, but you had the 3 figures, and did you was there something in front of them? Did you say a glowing thing in front of them, like a...
Well, it was... There were other things involved, too. It wasn't just that. It was like... patches of light, maybe, here and there. And the biggest thing was the feeling I was getting from it.
Did they have gender, the 3 things?
No, it was just more... It'd be more like what you would maybe expect a ghostly apparition with not really facial features or anything, but just, a fog type thing there.
The feeling?
Yeah, and most of it was the feeling. And when we got up there, when I saw that, it just really floored me, and I just remember I went down, sat down in the middle of the road. Because it wasn't really fear, it was just, it was overdoing my senses were just being just totally blasted out.
So this
I was
was
picking up so much energy and so much feeling, and it was overpowering is what it was, and it just made me really weak. I had to sit down. And when I sat down, I tried to meditate a little bit to try to relax. And it was weird because it sounded like everything got really quiet.
It did.
Yeah, and I remember Harriet said the same thing. She thought it was just all of a sudden like everything stopped.
That's when I took a leak. And I looked back and you were down on your knees.
Yeah.
You were seeing 3 figures? You were still seeing those 3 figures? Out where I was taking
No,
the
when
leak?
I stopped looking up there and sat down and closed my eyes and tried to refocus. But yeah, I did before then. That's what kind of made me feel so overpowered. But it wasn't like those things scared me or anything. Now, the shadowy thing did a little bit.
Is that the thing that you said went up into the trees?
Yeah, it moved across the road and just went into the woods. And then I started getting a real paranoid feeling like I was being watched from the woods.
See, that's right where I saw the shadow being. Right where you say you saw that shadow dart across. That's exactly where I saw this thing jump out at me.
Well, there was a clearing to the left where you could see, I guess, a house down through there. But I was more concerned with that corner lot there where there were woods. That's where I felt like something was watching us.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went further up the hill. I guess that was a clearing where
Harriet had seen hers.
seen things. But yeah, that's basically what happened.
I've talked about what happened to me afterwards. That night I had the vision of the drowning, somebody being murdered, drowned, and it felt like it was Harriet's, had something to do with Harriet's house. And it turned out that someone who had lived there had been drowned. But then 3 days later, I actually saw somebody being dragged out of the river at Magic Island. And that's what the vision was. I mean, the vision I had was Magic Island.
Premonition.
But there was also a past event, too. This person had lived in Harriet's house and had drowned. So I was kind of...
Didn't know which it was.
Yeah, I walked away not knowing what exactly happened. Did you have anything like that?
No, basically what I told you is right about it.
I had an experience of like my chakras, like the kundalini, like the energy blowing out the top of my head that night. Did you have that kind of thing?
I was just more or less all my senses were just totally overwhelmed. I felt like I was electric, you know. It was like I couldn't keep my breathing under control. I just felt weak. And that's what a lot of times when I'm doing, when I was doing the past life regression on her, it's like when you first start, everything's fine. Then once you start feeling everything coming to you, it's like it saps physical energy or something. I don't know how to explain it other than that.
So back to her, when you did her past life regression, you realized she had been hanged, or she realized
she was having a hard time. I tried twice. Didn't you keep giggling?
Yeah,
and
first.
she couldn't take me seriously.
Yeah, first.
And she kept giggling, and I tried a little bit different approach with her. I think we used the doors, took her down the hallway, told her to open doors. And she described what she was wearing. She had like a big dress, blue. And then she started getting a little agitated. And I could tell that she was really in there then. She wasn't joking around anymore. And it didn't take long for her just to get really freaked out, and she started bawling and sobbed, you know, like that, and I had to pull her out. She couldn't handle it.
Well, I was just telling her that I saw in one of my classes a woman get up in front of the class and get worked on, and a big rope burn appeared on her neck, and it turned out she had been hung in a previous life.
See, she has a lot of throat phobias too.
And the lady's posture and everything changed after that treatment. I've seen her since, and she walks erect, and her whole body language.
If I could have got her to handle it and talked her through it and got her past it, I'm kind of hoping we can get her past her throat phobia.
Well, I quit having the dreams and stuff about it.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it sounds like she's worked through it.
I'm even swallowing pills now.
Let's staying on Woodward Drive for a minute. This is another thing that happened last year. When we went to my house, or our house where we grew up, Harriet went to the valley that's sort of beyond the house there. And she had a vision of you walking at night in the woods, and she described the gown that you used to wear in detail. She described the color and the little bow at the top or whatever it was. And she's had a sense that you were being called out to the woods, and you were like in a trance. Does that remind you of anything?
I sleepwalk a lot. And I go through periods of my life where I sleepwalk like every night for a week or two. And I'll have...
Still?
Oh, yeah. I have night terrors. And, you know, at that house, I wandered off all the time. Nobody ever paid attention to me. When Mom went in there, I could have gone up to Grandpa's house and nobody would ever even know. That happened all the time. You remember that?
Mr. Hughes's once.
Yeah. But I have a reoccurring nightmare about that valley back there where all the trash was heaped, and it always involves snakes for some reason too. I don't know what. And lots of times I'll have a dream where I'm standing on that driveway in front of the house, and there's snakes everywhere, and I can't step.
Happened, honey. After that big flood, there were snakes everywhere coming up out of that
How
drain.
old was I?
That's true.
I don't know. That's you.
That's true.
You remember that?
I remember that.
Where,
Well, how old? I had to
And you
be
went out
pretty
there and
young.
saw one. I think I remember that.
Well, in this dream, they're everywhere, and I can't even take a step without there being one. Then maybe it was just a
Well, that's a common dream.
magnified my.
That's a common dream.
But they came down that hollow. They washed down that hollow from somewhere.
But in the same dream, there's like I'll look up through that valley and there's something there, and I'm totally terrified of it. And it's not just the snakes. And I have a lot of flying dreams too. And usually when I'm flying, I'm just a half inch away from this dark, ominous thing.
I don't understand.
And like, okay, I have dreams about that place out there all the time. And a lot of times I'll be flying around the house or over the hill, and in the woods or something, there's something that's just, I can smell it, I can feel it, I can feel its breath. It's like a half inch away from my feet, and I'm just barely keeping away from it. And it's going to kill me. I mean, it's a horrible.
It's flying and you're flying too.
No, it's on the ground. I'm flying, hovering above it, trying to get away from it. And it's just, it's always just right there. And no matter what I do, I can't get away from it. I can't get more than just like an inch from it.
Is it a stick figure? Because it sounds like my dream. I have the same dream, but it's a stick figure.
No, this is more like just a dark, ominous.
Has it got a robe on?
No, it's not something I could even draw. It's just like a black or mass or energy.
Is it a shadow?
Yeah, kind of like a shadow.
Okay.
Kind of like what I probably saw up there dart across the road, but maybe a little bit bigger. Of course, I'm looking down at it, and it's reaching for me, and I'm just barely away from it, and I can't get any further away from it. It never gets me. It just is always there until I wake up in a sweat and scream or whatever. I
Yeah.
scream all the time. She knows. In the middle of the night, I'll just scream for absolutely no reason and run. Or I'll wake up in the kitchen or somewhere and I'm screaming. Yeah, I still walk in my sleep quite a bit.
What about you said one night you had a dream, or not a dream, but there was a caped being above you in the bed?
Well, I
Can you
had
talk
two
about that?
different experiences in like the same week. And I know Mom remembers this because we went to Wildflowers and got a rock that was supposed to enhance your spiritual awareness or psychic
Well,
awareness.
there you go.
But I had two different experiences in like a week. And
Same thing I did. Remember, Andy? Two things in a week.
in the first one that happened it was a little bit different. The first thing, I woke up in the middle of the night and something was watching me, I felt. And I looked to the door, and just as plain as you're sitting right there, I mean, it looked like a large black man. His skin was real glistening, like he was oiled up or something, really muscular. Had big brass like bracelets on his wrists, and kind of like a loincloth type thing. And his head was the head of a bull with horns and red eyes. And, you know, all my life I've seen things and people, but this one was one of the more scary ones. But it didn't really scare me. I looked at it, I looked at all of its features, and I told it to go away. And I basically looked at it and said, I'm going to turn my head, and when I look back, you're going to be gone, because I don't want you here. There's no reason for you to be here. So I did it, and I looked, and he was gone. Well, a couple nights later, I woke up. This time, I could feel something above me. I didn't look up right away because I knew this one gave me a more ominous feeling. The bull was scary looking, but it didn't really frighten me. This one did. I finally looked straight up, and it was just like a cocoon or something, like a shape of a cocoon, or something with its, I kind of think of like a bat hanging upside down type thing. But, I mean, I couldn't see real detailed features. It was more just I could see the outline. It was either cocoon or something like that. And when I looked up at it, you know, I could see it was like it was connected to the ceiling. And however many feet, I mean, it was right in front of my face. It was probably 4 inches from my face. And again, though, I couldn't see facial features, but I could just feel it right on me. And it was, I screamed. I screamed, and I told, once again, I told it to do the same thing as I did the bull. I was just like, go away. I don't want you there. And it left. But this one left a little bit different. It was like almost like it disappeared in front of my eyes. It's almost like it broke into little pieces and disintegrated, which was a little bit different than the bull thing. But all my life, when I was a kid, I would see people in my room. I still do that. When I move into a new apartment or something, a lot of times I'll wake up and I'll see somebody walking through into the wall or something like that, and I can see who they are, you know, facial features with them. But I usually have to do a cleansing of the house, a ritual cleansing, and just sanctify everything and tell everything this is not where I want you.
What were some of the beings that you saw as a kid?
A lot of times I would see shapes. And that sounds kind of crazy probably. It's like geometric shapes floating.
Were they lit up? Like, did they have light source?
Yeah.
in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a pyramid or a triangle. And I don't know if I ever told Mom these stories or not. She probably wouldn't have believed me when I was little. I mean, this was like when I was probably 5 or 6 years old. When we lived in Dunbar, I remember doing that in the attic, when I lived in the attic there, and I was probably 5 or 6. I just moved out from Woodward Drive. But I mean, I grew up always covering my head with the sheet and just making a little hole where I could breathe, because I knew that if I uncovered my head, I'd see something. And I until I became an adult, I never slept with my head uncovered. But I would just, if I was looking, I'd see something. And a lot of times it almost looked like neon, like glowing. Something neon, like a neon light. And I'd look up and it'd be like a triangle, and it would just float there. And I would look at it and watch it, and then it would just disappear. Or it'd be a circle or a square. I don't know why.
Wow.
It never scared me, really. It was something I saw.
Other than me sneaking up on you
Yeah.
at night in the bedroom.
And I
Did you
had
see
attic doors. It was an attic with like a ceiling like this, and those little attic doors. A lot of times I'd wake up and I'd feel something, and then one of the doors would open. And I'd have to run, close it, and get back into bed because I couldn't go to sleep with it open. But it would just slowly go. And I'd wake up right before it would happen. That happened a lot too. A lot of these things I've forgotten. I forgot about the attic doors.
Anything out on Woodward like that, other than me sneaking in to scare you?
I don't know. I think I just don't remember a lot of things as I was younger. You know.
Yeah.
The valley behind the house, and the rocks right directly behind the house. Where the house was, and then there was a wall of rock, and there was kind of like a little tunnel way back there.
Mm-hmm.
That was a scary place. I didn't like to go back there.
That's where I would see the Bigfoots. They would just troll up and down that walkway.
Really?
And I would go in my nightmares, and I go to that kitchen window that opens onto the back there, and I stick my head out, and I'm terrified. And I try to see them, you know. And I just see it go around the corner at the other end of the house.
I don't remember seeing anything necessarily back there. It was just more, I didn't want to go back there because I knew it was not a place I wanted to go. It scared me. I don't know why.
And I had a nightmare about somebody coming up between the houses and the steps between the houses.
Mm-hmm. Where the addition and
Yeah, it was like a guy in a big black boiler cap. Like a bull, or what do you call it? Bowl?
like an Abraham Lincoln hat.
Yeah, but rounded. top hat.
Oh, okay.
A person with a big black cloak, like dressed like a man in black.
Mm-hmm.
And he looks in, and I look at his face, and I see nothing but black, void, like into infinity, like death.
Into him? Like what you're looking at?
Yeah, like he's death or something, and you're looking in. But that's a scary dream. He may or may not be connected to this dream I have of black cars going up and down the road, floating above the ground. Well, it's kind of, I recognized all of these dreams before I started reading about UFOs. So when I started reading the books on the UFOs, and I started hearing about the big black cars and the men in black, then I was like, wow, that's the dream I had. What is that about? Why? There must be something to this, because I was dreaming about this stuff before I heard about it.
There's one other dream I've had, and I have the same exact dreams usually yearly. It's almost like a movie. I can predict exactly what's going to happen in it. I've even woke up, went back to sleep, and picked up right where I left off. But I also have one about above Grandpa's house, up above like where there's like a garden or something.
Mm-hmm.
Back there behind that too.
You have a picture in your house of you with a camera around your neck?
Yeah.
That night, we were at a party at Aunt Jenny's.
Yeah.
That night, I went to the back door and I looked at the pipeline up there, right where you're talking about, and I felt that something out there was alive. Like there was an alive presence, and it was calling to me, like saying, "Come up here, and you'll never have to go back." And I just remember I was totally terrified. It was the scariest thing I've ever felt. It was like it was alive.
See, I never go up there in my dream. I'm just usually standing behind the house looking up there thinking, I'm not gonna go
by this time I was in my
Oh yeah, you were older.
I was 20s or 30s, and I was absolutely terrified that was there was some real thing there that was wanted my soul or something.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a dream. It's a dream that both of us had. Well,
last time you ran out.
Before we get into this one, I'll mention the other one. Spring and I both had a dream of globes of light coming in the house and hypnotizing us. And then I took Harriet up there, and this is in the video, and she said she saw us being interrogated by two men, and like we were all in a trance. There's instances in our family of people, and with Harriet, people having the same dream. Me and Spring had the same dream. Me and Harriet have the same dream now of being in a classroom where we're being taught things, and it's the same building. We both realized we were having dreams about this place. Now, the dream that you and I are talking about is about this railroad trestle in St. Albans, and I had a dream of it, and Mom was there. And then when I described it to you, you said you had the same dream.
I think I said it first.
No, you said it first.
Yeah, because we were just talking in general that night. That was right after we got back, wasn't it? From going up Woodward Drive.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all sitting up talking about all this stuff. And I think we were talking about out-of-body experiences or something, because I kind of thought that's what it was. But I had this dream or whatever that I was flying above this railroad station, and this has happened years ago. And I'd never been there, didn't recognize it. But then when I was driving through St. Albans years later, I saw it, and I was like, that's the place I dreamed about. But there was one other strange thing in that dream, too, where I think I was testing myself to see, I was trying to test myself to see if it was real or not. And I went into, it was like a bathroom or something in the railroad station. And there was a sink on, and there was steam over a mirror, and I went over to the mirror and went like that to see if anything would happen, and I wiped away the steam. And to me, it was...
In your dream?
Yeah, in my dream. And to me, that was kind of like proof of I'm actually physically here. Does that make sense?
Right.
I was trying to do something to affect something there so I could try to figure out if it was real or if it was just a dream. But
Perhaps.
then when I was talking about that, I could tell by the look in your eyes something was going on, and you said you'd had a dream about the same place.
I think we're dreaming the Mothman's dreams.
Of flying around.
That's what I think. I have lots of dreams where I'm flying around, and I notice the people's reaction to me, and it's very scary. They're very afraid of me, and I think that I'm dreaming his dreams.
Oh, and just about every dream I have, I'm flying at one point or another.
And this is what, if you read Gray Barker's Silver Bridge, he was the first UFO researcher to get on the Mothman story. He actually wrote some chapters in there where he describes it the same way, that he feels like that he somehow has a psychic connection to the Mothman.
We know some people don't have flying dreams at all,
Sure.
and other people do. And sometimes you'll talk about flying in your dreams, and people look at you like you're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
They've never done it, and other people do it all the time. So there's some difference that makes some of us do and some of us not.
There's lots of things I love about the Mothman phenomenon, little tidbits little coincidences that just get your mind going. Here we are in Dunbar, West Virginia. This is the site of one of the sightings in the Mothman Prophecies book. When this interstate was being built, when they just finished it, the bridge here, there was a sighting on top of the bridge of a silver sphere. I guess they came back a few times to check out. Keel even came back and found weird tracks off to the side that looked like wolf prints or some animal prints that they'd seen at other sightings around the country. Or were they the mysterious footprints, boot prints? I can't remember, but it was a famous sighting, and there were some threats made afterwards to the person who had seen the sphere. But here we are at this overpass, and one of the interesting things I note, let's show you the overpass, is that if you see below there the sign that says Shamblin Stone, Mr. Shamblin now owns our family farm. He now owns and lives on the family farm that my mother was born on and grew up on. And anyway, interesting. Here we're crossing the Dunbar Bridge. It's not a whole lot different than the Silver Bridge was. Okay, here we are, Nitro, West Virginia. Nitro, West Virginia is just a wonderful place. It has an interesting history. It was it was named Nitro because this is where they made most of the nitroglycerin during the war years. Today, it's known for being one of the two places in America where they make the gas that killed everyone in Bhopal, India. And my cousin actually works directly, and I think she's a supervisor, yes, of the division which handles that gas. She tells me that she actually reaches her hands in the robotic arm, or not robotic arm, but into the plastic arm things and mixes the stuff up. Of course, it's the least amount of it gets out. It just kills thousands of people. So her and her husband both work with that in that area. Anyway, back to the thread here. Nitro is also happens to be the town where, in addition to having Mothman sightings, also recently was in the news because this is where the Clonade Foundation, set up by the Raelian cult, started their first office to clone a human here in the local high school. What was once the local high school, it's now a community center. I don't know exactly what connection the Raelians and the Clonade First human cloning has to do with Mothman, but anytime you get into the cult stories that sort of for some reason become big and then they turn out to be false, you often wonder if it was a little disinformation campaign by the intelligence agencies to sort of muddy the waters of a particular issue. In this case, it would be cloning. Come up with a fake story that's full of holes, that's bizarre, in order to make the real cloning, to sort of get people's feet wet in regards to the issue, so that when it actually does come around, people are more blasé about it. For some reason, the Raelian cult reminds me of the Heaven's Gate cult. And a lot of people don't remember this, but the Heaven's Gate cult was in the news for a while before it seemed that their raison for existence occurred, which was they seemed to all kill themselves the same week that the Martin Luther King family announced that they finally believed that James Earl Ray did not shoot Martin Luther King. And of course, this was big news. There had already been a mock court trial set up by William Pepper, who was Ray's attorney, that showed, that had Ray gotten a fair trial with all the evidence, that he would have been acquitted, because the evidence was so flimsy, and it was obvious that he was set up by the intelligence agencies. And so when this announcement came out, this really earth-shattering news that the King family themselves did not believe the story, that they believed the government killed their father, that the Heaven's Gate cult suddenly decides to kill themselves. Although they killed themselves a day or two before the announcement by the King family, they held off on the story for a couple of days before it finally broke on the same exact day. And so when you turn on the TV, instead of seeing the King family saying there's a government conspiracy, you see the Heaven's Gate, Nike shoes, dead people, and it just completely obliterated the King story. Now, the Raelian cult may be similar. Maybe they've now entered the consciousness of the public a little bit. We've heard a story about them trying to clone people. They're obviously nutty. We've seen their leader, Klaus, I forget his name. He's a French race car driver. We've seen him on TV, getting all frustrated with Geraldo or whoever is interviewing him, and so the stage is set for the Raelian cult to fulfill their destiny at some time in the future, appointed by whoever controls the workings from behind the scenes. Well, it looks like we've found it. This is the building where the clonade is supposed to be. This would be your old high school, now turned community center. It happens to be in the same building with the police department, which is interesting. Okay, here we are we're inside the community center. I can't remember which room clonade was in. This room right here is 203. It's got some Christian materials in there right now. Was this the room? 203? Or was it 115? It seems like it was 115 or something. Check it out. Room 205 is the Genealogical Society. This looks like it, sort of. In room 200, we used to have raw security. What the hell is that? Doesn't look like they're here anymore. Okay, just a little quickie here. We're at Magic Island. What used to be Magic Island. It's been filled in. It used to sort of be an island. Now it's, I don't know, it's like they dumped a bunch of earth here and made a park, which they use for coal mining parties. But if you look over this way,
see the confluence of the Kanawha and Elk Rivers there, right under that bridge. Sort of right there. Where's my finger there? Sort of under that bridge there. Here's the island itself. And then down this way where you see the truck, right beyond this truck is where I saw them pulling someone out of the river who had drowned last year after we visited the energy field. Last night we visited the energy field once again. It's completely different. There was nothing going on there. Loretta, my sister, took her magic wand and her magic head whatever it is. It's sort of like a tiara with a quartz crystal in the center. She talked about just generally being so used to these kinds of things that there was no real trepidation on her part, just sort of looking for some entertainment, I guess, and then maybe her attitude of sort of blasé attitude just kept the energy field at bay last night. But anyway, I thought it was nice to come here during the day so people could get a sense of Magic Island, and because all I could get the night of the drowning was just a few emergency lights, so it was dark out on the water. But Sunrise Museum. There was a famous Mothman sighting here. Yes, indeed. There were some Mothman sightings in Charleston that never made it into the Mothman book. And one of those, or a couple of those, were over Sunrise Museum, a famous museum here in town. Fish, the assistant that we had in 2002 on our Woodward Drive tour, actually works there. But yeah, it was well known in town. I remember news reports of Mothman being seen right in downtown Charleston above the museum there. It never made it into the book, but we're here today. It also happens to be this very close to where the actress Jennifer Garner grew up. Now, why do I mention Jennifer Garner? Well, simply because she's known for that show Alias, where she plays a CIA agent. And in the show, there's a bad CIA and a good CIA. Sort of has brought that sort of consciousnness to the public mind, that there are elements in the CIA which have aligned themselves perhaps with some of the Nazi folks who were brought over after the war and brought into the intelligence services. I think it's interesting that a woman from West Virginia has been chosen to play a famous CIA agent on TV, because as we mentioned last year, a lot of the women from Roane County have been, especially the ones in Harriet's family and some of their friends, were recruited by the CIA and the NSA. And it's just another one of those coincidences. And also, this interesting story that came up during the Iraq War this year, that Jessica Lynch became famous, another woman from West Virginia, very close to Roane County. In fact, she grew up just a few miles from my mom's family farm near Ripley. I think Palestine is just a few miles west of Ripley. And that case, in the case of Miss Lynch, there were lots of CIA connections. Her rescue was prompted by a CIA informant who got photos of her and supposedly gave it to the military, and then they had this made-for-TV rescue, which turns out to have been completely, just sort of a made-for-TV event. There was no real resistance, and the people in the hospital weren't trying to hide her. In fact, they were just trying to help her and get her out, and the military sort of burst in there and scared everyone and sort of pushed people around for no reason. And the name, that they picked someone from Palestine
West Virginia, that name, and so that her roommate was a Hopi. And as you know, in the Mothman prophecies, there was a mention of a prophecy that involved the Hopi Indians. So there's 2 incidences of women from West Virginia sort of coming into the national consciousness via CIA, the medium of the CIA, or the idea of the CIA, either directly or indirectly. Okay, now I'd like to introduce our next guest, Robert Godbey. Robert is a physicist, corporate consultant, an expert on education. He was a pioneer of the early computer days in the late 70s. Developed lots of interesting new ways of programming and dealing with large amounts of data. Robert is a very special person to me. He was a good friend to me after Tommy left our area, and Robert and I sort of took up where Tommy and I had left off, doing projects involving video, outer space research, very creative things, and fun things. Rob gave a great interview in 1987 about the coming fake war against the aliens, one world government in league against an alien threat which might be created at some point in the future. And I think we're going to revisit that in the next segment coming up after Robert's interview here. Robert's interview here does foreshadow some of the issues we're going to be dealing with in the next installment. Okay, you were saying that, what were you saying? There's a mantra with art and business.
Well, I was saying that I think that the biggest difference between the so-called old economy and new economy has less to do with technology and more to do with the emphasis on the creative process. Creative process is becoming more and more a part of the work that everybody does. And if you look at the supply chain right now in any industry, the part where the most money is made, the most value is delivered is at the design part of it. And once an industry matures and we kind of work out the bugs of how to make whatever it is that's been designed, that part becomes a commodity and becomes less and less important in terms of, fun to do work and that type of issue. So one of the weird things going on right now is that when you think about trying to develop an economy in an area, bringing an old style factory that's focused on doing the commodity work is just sort of stalling, because that is going to go somewhere where the labor's cheaper and where they're focusing on doing commodity work, and they can't do what I consider to be the people work, the things that machines can't do, which is think, design, and come up with something new. So you look at an example like the car industry, which is so mature right now. They're buying each other out, and it's the industry starting to collapse on itself. And the quality now between the best made car in the world and the worst made car in the world is probably measured in decimal points now. I mean, it's really, every car runs. But what sells cars and what the car makers are out there fighting for right now are designers, people that can design a car that's unique, fills some need that's not currently being met, that will inspire enough people to buy that model, because that's the only distinction now between one make and another is uniqueness of design. And so I think that what's happening right now in the world is that we're this main change in this economy, where they end up labeling this, the move on from the Industrial Revolution is going to be all about people doing people work, which is thinking and designing and creating, and leaving the repetitive, motion syndrome type stuff, anything that can be automated to the machines. And that means that all the dumb jobs are going away, particularly in our end of the economy. And we're not changing our social structures to take this into account. We're not teaching people about design when they're young. We're not letting them be creative in school. We're operating in a school model that was designed probably in the 19th century around sort of the old Prussian idea that 20% of the population is going to be the bosses and the other 80% is going to be the soldiers or the worker bees or whatever. And that's not teaching people how to operate in the new world. And when you look at at the real social problems right now with the school systems and the economy and things like that. That's the central piece that seems to be missing, is that people haven't grasped it's not just an issue of jobs moving someplace else. It's that you're not training people to work in this new economy where they need to think, they need to solve problems, and they need to be able to be creative. And I'm not saying, creativity at the expense of being analytical. I'm saying you combine the two things together. One of the problems with the traditional education system is that we separate out and say that if you can be analytical, then you need to be in this track and go to college and do these types of things. And if you're not analytical, then we'll throw you to vocational school and maybe you'll be crafty or arty or whatever, But that's, I have on my business card now, creative analyst, which I got from a book called Accelerated Learning in the 21st Century. But the idea that what we need to create from our education system are creative analysts, not one or the other, but that combination of both. If you want my opinion, it's much easier to teach people technical, analytical skills later in life than it is to teach them artistic creativity skills later in life. And so my model for developing, people is always, let them get their base training in the thing that's harder to teach, and then, teach them and on the job the stuff that's a little bit easier to pick up along the way, and also that might change over time.
What was that last thing you said before we got in the car?
I said that if I was, designing the new school system, that I would make middle school, kind of like the traditional junior high school, be a graphic arts education, where everybody going into middle school would have to pick from the spectrum of the graphic arts, whether it be like anything from photography, which is probably the most, technical, I guess, to, painting, if that's what somebody wants to do. Whatever the traditional, 2-year degree programs are now in graphical arts, there's enough of a spectrum for everyone to pick something to study. And what they learn in the course of a 3-year middle school to get a 2-year degree is how to work on projects, how to be creative. The whole creative process gets taught. And they actually also learn that you can get a meaningful degree in 2 years of work, or 2 to 3 years of work. This is the other important message, is that you need to retrain yourself every couple of years. And then I would go from middle school into high school, and high school would be like a 2-year community college. More how do they do the calculation? It's like more West Virginians have lost their lives defending their country in all the wars back to the Civil War than any other state. I don't know if that's like per capita or how they do the ratio. I guess a larger percentage, based on the number of people that live here, basically go off and fight in all the wars. And it's one of those kind of things where it's like there's definitely an underlying cultural thing here that, whether it's, I don't know what drives it, and it may not have anything to do with any kind of planned event, but just there's something about West Virginia that tends to lead to more of them playing these roles. And I bumped into different groups of people too, like I don't know what the actual count would be, but I was surprised to hear of several different Secret Service agents being from West Virginia. And just my few encounters with Secret Service people, it's been like, oh yeah, you're from West Virginia, aren't you? Well, so is this guy. It's happened like 2 or 3 times. And so I don't know if there's like a large percentage of them. It's just because we're close to DC or what. But that's one of the ones. And you hear the same thing about like the FBI and stuff like that. So it's there's definitely something that seems to be cultural about the amount of military participation and federal participation and those types of things for the state. They could lead to what you're talking about. You'd start recognizing, these types of serendipities if the number of people is just higher.
Well, this is purely for entertainment purposes, but I thought I may have sent you this email and I may have not. But I was just I did a search on Sugar Grove, which was the site that Harriet said she remote viewed, and she came up with a new idea which was that they were not just doing echelon intelligence stuff, that they were doing this submarine stuff, and that's not really come up about Sugar Grove that much except I guess on if you were in the military or something, you might know more about it. I don't think it's general knowledge that they were doing anything other than just listening.
Huh.
Because it turns out that they indeed are like third in the chain of command, just beneath only like the director of
the director of the Navy, and then the co-director of the Navy, and then Sugar Grove is the next down in line on the list of the chain of command, which is just a public record of what the chain of command is.
That's interesting.
Yeah, so obviously they are, probably doing that kind of thing there.
Yeah.
So
I don't remember getting that email from you. But
so that's public record, so we're not getting in trouble here. But
that's just interesting. I remember when both you and Harriet were talking about a listening post kind of place and where it was and what they might be listening to and why that would be a good place to do it. And I'd mentioned that when I was in college that there was a facility in northern Michigan somewhere that was designed to communicate with nuclear submarines because they needed to create a special communication system with really huge, waves, basically. A wavelength that would be so big that you'd need to be kind of, out in a remote area to be able to send and receive these things without, kind of messing with other stuff or being interfered with or whatever. I think they called the system ELF, if I remember right. ELF, it stood for it was an acronym for something. And I was just, just sort of threw that one out there. Like
extremely low frequency.
Yeah, I think that's what it is, because low frequency means, high wavelength or big wavelength or whatever. So that's probably what it is. Extreme low frequency to get through basically the Earth to get to the submarine. It's pretty bizarre. And I was just sort of wondering if they were doing the same kind of thing. They got to have more than one station, I would imagine. I mean, Michigan kind of makes more sense to me because I think it's closer. It's got to be closer to the pole, and they tend to do a lot of communications with subs across the polar areas where you got less distance to cross, and the submarines kind of hang out there when they're hiding and stuff like that anyway. But they can't have everything in that one part of the world, so having another one somewhere else would be kind of interesting. But I had no idea that a place landlocked in West Virginia would be high up in the command structure for the Navy. It sounds really bizarre. Mm-hmm. Electric fields can cause hallucinations or whatever. And some study that says that they can produce similar hallucinations in different people, and that may be frequency based or whatever. You also mentioned some similarities between certain types of drugs or whatever that cause similar hallucinations in different people. And I was just saying, that's the connection between electrochemical, the electrical fields, causing some kind of chemical reaction in the brain or whatever if they're having hallucinations. And of course, the chemicals are, doing the sort of the reverse or causing the same kind of thing. The whole brain works on electrochemical, transitions from one to the other. It's very interesting to think about that.
Could you comment on the alien invasion idea? I heard, that's what I was talking about. It was
right.
Major Downey predicts that in the year 2012, around there, that will be a time when they're going to do a fake alien invasion, to make a long story short.
Interesting.
And it also happens to be the time at which a stock analyst friend of mine told me that the system will no longer support all the investment that's out there. There's something about the demographic that the people who are pumping money into the stock market and various funds and things that's going to demographically have to go down at that point. There's no doubt.
Interesting.
There was no way to sustain there will be no way to sustain the current standard of living. Just based on the population explosion sort of that occurred after the war.
And so one way to dampen it would be to have an alien invasion. It's an interesting idea.
Yeah. I was wondering if you thought more about that idea because you brought it up, in 1987.
I did. I don't even remember that.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
What did I say?
You said that Star Wars had to do with that the psychology of Star Wars was to set up fear of an outside force coming down, and that it could be extended to other countries for a while, but once one country took over to a certain point, it would therefore have to create an outside menace if it had no internal.
That's true. That's right. Always looking for a new enemy. They even talk about that as one of those sort of science fiction theories that what's going to unite the world population would have to be an outside enemy, kind of thing.
Yeah, that was you actually said that.
Yeah. Interesting idea. What do I have? I think I was just telling you that in the Matrix they were explaining the anomalies that we see in life, the paranormal things like ghosts and other things like that. I think the person who plays the Oracle explaining those as basically being glitches in the programming. You're either actually seeing the program itself, a piece of it mess up, or you're seeing the fix, coming in to fix the program that messed up. And from our vantage point, that would be very odd looking, And I even had a character in the movie kind of play this role of looking like a ghost when it went from one thing to another or whatever, I guess just sort of emphasize that idea. And, how's that different than explaining the same thing as being, groupings of different types of, of energy or whatever, It's just the labels that we put on them.
This gets me back to Major Downey, this unknown character on the internet. Who was an intelligence guy, he said that he described the Mothman incident as the same kind of thing, that when they fired all of these electromagnetic waves into Point Pleasant, that it caused an anomaly, which was the Mothman. And they call them black dogs. Any kind of entity like that, be it a Bigfoot or a Mothman or, Black Panther or whatever, a Jersey demon, those are all like black dogs. It's just a generic term. So this electromagnetism caused the black dogs to get loose. And he sort of speaks in occult terms because apparently in the agency at that time there had a lot of occultists who understood all this stuff, the ancient stuff. So they sent in the Men in Black to fix it for the government. But there were also Men in Black there who are occultic people, sort of private, you might say, who go in to control the black dogs too. And I guess there was a gentleman's agreement between the two groups. The government's going to let the private guys may or may not be connected to like Masonic orders, but that's kind of the implication. They're real people, but they have an allegiance to these occultic forces. So the two were there, the real Men in Black, the occultic ones, and then the government Men in Black, and they get mixed up in the story, and you don't know which one's which.
Interesting.
But according to him, it was gotten under control. I don't know. I don't know if it had to do with a sacrifice. Maybe they had to sacrifice the people on the bridge to stop it or something. Maybe he didn't really say that. I'm just sort of assuming. What could the fix really have been? So it goes on to say that there was a split then, a change in the agencies, and they went away from the guys who were more in tune with the occult stuff, and they went more to military guys. And the old guys retired off, and so the new guys were sort of left to do more what you're describing earlier as design work. The old Men in Black government guys became intelligence guys more purely, and they sent the military special ops guys in to do cleanup work like stop a black dog, or the nature of the experiments changed. They went away from the totally wild experiments, and he described the Mothman as just a wild, creative idea. Somebody had a creative idea to do this wacky experiment, and that they went away from that stuff because it was, I don't know why, but
maybe the blowback was getting too hard to keep covering up.
Well, he thinks that the shift was bad. The shift to the new way isn't as good because the new guys don't have they don't respect the old knowledge, so they're not really prepared to deal with this occultic stuff. So
it's funny how many different stories that sort of occultish, like you talk about the Men in Black that were working for the occult or whatever, that theme keeps coming up in those different versions of the story, that you keep seeing over and over again. And that connection to the Masonic orders is usually drawn on. It's real interesting. And if you look at all the different systems that we now understand, they amount to maybe 10-20% of what's really going on out there. It's just the simpler, easier to explain types of things. This is part of chaos theory. Is the part that we don't work with is the chaos part. And so the simple, home experiment for you to do is to turn on the water faucet, and when you turn it on and it flows nicely, that's the physics that we can explain. And if you turn the water on really, really slow and get right to the point where it starts to sputter, but it doesn't really flow, and you leave the water on there and like to watch the drops kind of come out, try to predict where the drop is going to come out next, and you can't do it. I mean, it's so chaotic that nobody can tell you what drop's going to come out where next. That's the part that we don't understand. And it turns out that that's the majority in nature, right? 80% of it is more like the sputtering faucet, not the free-flowing, you know. And so all the successes up till now have been all about explaining more or less the easier part to explain, and we can't do it when the math gets so complicated it breaks down. Well, Wolfram's work is all about looking for patterns, you know, patterns in the, you know, in the motion, patterns in the, you know, in the data, so to speak. And it's not trying to solve individual equations for a particular, you know, activity or motion or whatever, but it's more along the lines of I don't know how to explain it almost. It's almost like using sort of, you know, simulations or whatever of the thing until you can kind of almost average out what's really going on. It's hard to put it's hard to put into words without an example, and even the examples are complicated. But it's sort of a new approach to science. It's not going through and trying to solve an individual equation when the motion's so complicated that doesn't tell you anything. It's more or less looking at sort of systems of information. I guess a good way to talk about it is, did you ever see the early computer game that was called Life? And they would start like a handful of dots on the screen, and they would have rules of how they could propagate. You know, I mean, they would. You know, I mean, you know, if two certain types of things were together, then you'd get a new one on the next line down. And if they weren't, you wouldn't get one. And then you would run the program, and you would watch the patterns form. And what's interesting about it is that, you know, with really simple little rules of how they could propagate, and starting off with just 2 or 3 things, you would end up with these, you know, this screen full of these particles or whatever, and they would form eddies and holes and all different kinds of shapes, or they would just die out completely after a few runs. I mean, it would be one extreme or the other. And the point is that that's what a lot of nature is about. And I couldn't write an equation to tell you what pattern was going to show up based on which rule or which number of things I started with, but I could run it and see what shows up and explain the thing that way. And if you're familiar with the Asian game Go, you know, they played a lot in Japan, and I think it was invented in China or whatever. It's kind of like comparing that to chess. You know, chess is a very formulated game where all the motion is described. Some of the motion is you know, a little bit more complicated than others. You know, like the knight versus the queen, all that kind of stuff. But there's rules for every piece, and we now have computers. Like IBM built the first one, but we now have computers that are complicated enough that they can beat a grandmaster in chess because the rules are known, and it's just a problem of processing power. And so the computer Deep Blue, the first one that IBM made, actually had an individual computer under each square of the chessboard, and by doing that, they were able to beat a grandmaster. And they've even gone beyond that now. So, but Go is a game of pattern formation across a board, and the rules, there's no complicated movement of any pieces. They all have the same rules that apply to them, but based on the rules of propagation, if enough white stones surround the black stone, then that black stone comes off the board, and all of the ebb and flow, that makes a much more complicated game. And we're literally years away from a computer powerful enough to beat a Go master. So it's the difference between chess and Go. It's kind of understand the difference in how the new science would work. You know, impressive capitalism, I think.
So, what haven't we talked about yet?
Oh, I don't know.
The paranormal, science and the paranormal. Can you fill in any gaps that anything that you said earlier that there are some things about it that you had thought about?
It's along the lines of what we were talking about. I think that there's a lot of things that are unexplained, and it makes sense. As I mentioned before, science is really probably only working with about 10, maybe 20% the best of the information right now, and trying to sort through it. But that discipline that the scientific method, or whatever you want to call it, brings to figuring things out, I think has still been a net gain over the past when everything was sort of built on superstition and that type of stuff. So it's kind of a matter of patience. But to give you an example, and I can remember when the stories about ball lightning were considered to be myth. The average scientist would say that doesn't exist. These stories they're too fantastic. This glowing ball of light's chasing me and stuff like that. And then I finally got observed enough times that it was proven to be an actual physical phenomenon. And now there are a few different people that have been trying to do controlled experiments to study the whole phenomenon and understand that some of the stories actually make sense in the context of what we now know with scientific knowledge.
Or if it's not ball lightning, you could call it something a little different, like balls of electricity.
Right.
I mean, there's a word for it, but it exists. It's
sure. No, and we're even starting to understand it and why it would do some of the things it's been accused of doing. But that's the nature of science.
I think the word lightning just got in a lot of people's way.
Well, they actually believe that what's being formed is actually being formed by lightning. It supercharges pockets of air at different times in forms of plasma, and the plasma is inherently unstable. It would take a spherical form because that would be the shape of lowest energy, and then it would tend to chase metal objects because of the magnetic pull that it would have. It would be a charged body of plasma, and so
this would explain why we saw balls of light in our house, because we live right next to the pipeline, which also ran by Tommy and Harriet's house, the same pipeline. A lot of electricity, a lot of lightning.
Very interesting. It's real possible.
Speaking of lightning, do you remember Lightning, the guy who pushed around the cart and collected cans and bottles?
Yeah, I remember.
He was a super math whiz of Ripley's Believe It or Not fame.
I'd heard that before. Even when I was growing up, they said he could do, what was it? He was supposed to be able to tell you the number of bricks in something or something like that and be incredibly accurate. That was one of the stories I heard growing up.
Now, one of the interesting things about how he fits into the Mothman story on Woodward Drive is that I used to jog a lot late at night. I was an athlete, I was always, and late at night was perfect for me because that was when I could let off my steam or whatever, and it was generally cool at night, so it was a lot better. So I would run all the way down Woodward Drive, and usually you'd see Lightning during the day. And he sort of hung around there where Zabel Drive meets Woodward, where there's this castle, what they call the medieval castle. Donnie Fields knows quite a bit about it, but the old lady that lived there used to play the organ. She had a massive church organ, and it would reverberate all the way down the block to Woodward Drive, right at the corner there. And I would often jog down there late at night, and she would be playing songs, and I would just hang out and listen for a while. And there were a couple of times that Lightning was there listening too. And I got the sense from him that he was telepathic. That's the best way I can describe it, is that every time I saw him, I felt like he was speaking to me somehow. And I've never experienced that with anyone else. Except in a dream state or something.
Yeah.
But that's just something I've noticed.
That's interesting.
He's always stuck in my mind, his eyes.
I don't know.
These piercing eyes.
I don't know if I ever met him.
If he had super mental capabilities, he might have had the ability to be telepathic just naturally.
It's possible.
And it probably is what drove him nuts. If you want to call him nuts for doing something that seems so pointless.
Right.
He was actually, in a Buddhist way, sort of practicing his own dharma, his own meaningless behavior. But you think about it, he probably would be quickly ostracized in certain ways if he did have telepathic abilities, because people would be so frightened by it. And it almost might force you to become a bottle collector.
I can see that.
And again, I don't know if that has anything to do with Mothman per se. It's just another strange thing from Woodward Drive, like Charlie Manson and like Sarah Jane Moore. And any of the other things that I can't think of right now, but
maybe you need to do a story about Woodward Drive.
Well, that's essentially what it is.
Call it that,
That's essentially what it is. Yeah.
That's interesting. It is.
That looks like an eye.
No, I was going to say that there are things that we don't understand. There's probably always going to be things that we don't understand. But I think it's important to have a process to gain understanding, like we use in the scientific community or whatever, and take the time to do that before we try to decide what's going on. I mean, that's the difference between, to me, sort of the old superstitious way of doing things. We assign a meaning or an outcome before we really understand what's going on, versus what at least science is built on trying to do, which is to, gain understanding before you kind of label it, what it is. And that part to me is pretty important. And I think that we're going to see that that's going to require us to make quite a few changes. But one of the beauties about the discipline of science is that, you've got to kind of to follow where the objective answer takes you, whether you like it or not. And that's one of the things I've always liked about it.
In energy work, it's called having no agenda.
Right.
You can't effectively treat a person until you have no agenda.
Sure.
It's the same idea.
Makes perfect sense.
And Buddhist business rules. Buddhist business will rewrite everything. Buddhist business practices. You are the thinking principle in action. The universe is having a dialogue with itself. We are in Seattle, and it is September 7th, 2003. I couldn't resist the urge to put in, instead of putting in outtakes here, to do a little summary and perhaps bring us up to date a little bit on events and get us ready for segment 2 of the Mothman Photographer. In a week, we have the Mothman Festival, the second annual, apparently. And this is supposed to be a secret. John Keel is supposed to attend. We are hoping for great fun and sharing information, and apparently there's going to be the unveiling of the Mothman statue on Saturday. One of the more random things I wanted to mention, I mentioned it in segment 2 as well, but I just think it's such an interesting story. Infowars.com, Bohemian Grove is where the global elite has a yearly meeting for the past 130 years. The Republican Burning Man, where they do rituals, sacrificing an effigy of a human being to what they call the Great Owl of Bohemia, what we might call the Mothman. So here we have, I just think it's such a funny image to think of my president worshiping a statue of a large Mothman-like creature. And I've actually seen the footage, and I can tell you it seems like a somewhat unorganized ritual. Nearest I can, it sort of seems like a Klan rally or something. It's organized, but it's not. There's some voices, things, people say things. But it is definitely terrifying when, at one moment, the owl becomes lit by the fires or whatever, and it's quite large and quite terrifying. Another article that caught my eye. This is an older article, actually from March of this year. Talking fish stuns New York. This is a story about, and I hope I haven't told this already on the video here, but. A fish heading for slaughter in a New York market shouted warnings about the end of the world before it was killed. 2 fish cutters have claimed. Well, they both heard it, and it's saying that the end of the world is at hand. And when you've got fish coming forward to say that we're reaching the end, I think it's time to pay attention. Which brings me to my next subject. Whitley Strieber's The Secret School, Preparation for Contact. This book has been out a few years, 96. But not a lot of people have read this book, and it's a shame because this book sheds a lot of light on the Mothman phenomenon. Specifically, the part of the phenomenon where you have these secret schools where it seems as if ultra-dimensionals or extraterrestrials are teaching children about atemporality at night away from their homes. These kids all have these urges to go to a certain part of the woods. They're shown visions of future and past events. And during the daytime, they're kind of unaware of it. They know they have these feelings of comradeship with other kids who at night are going to these, but and during the day they may even not really know the kids that well. But these bonds did develop as, at a subconscious level. These kids were drawn to each other. In this book, there are a lot of great ideas and great theorizing about what this phenomenon is about. And one of the things that struck me and ties in with this fish story is the idea of a prophecy and what it means. Strieber goes to great pains to explain the nature of prophecy in this book. Prophecies the ability to prophesy appears to grow as people reach certain end times, you might say, at ellipses in time where, let's say, now it is widely acknowledged that we're reaching the end of an era, according to a lot of ancient calendars. And this manifests as these times come, people's abilities do increase in the area of being able to prophesy and see into not only the future but the past. What this means to me is that my 911 precognition, which as I told you earlier was a little off. In other words, I was seeing buildings that didn't look exactly like the World Trade Center. And I was also seeing a larger scale destruction. So where Strieber comes in is he reminds us that prophecies are not meant to come true. They're meant to go wrong. They're there as a warning tool to people who, let's say in this situation, are perhaps becoming more intuitive and more in touch with these kinds of messages. These visions come forth, and they are tools for us to make sure that eventuality doesn't happen, because time is plastic. Things can happen, things can be predicted, but they can also be avoided. And I think it makes my precognition a little more interesting in that, it could mean a lot of more things than I was thinking before. It could mean that there was going to be larger scale destruction than there was, but somehow that was reduced. It's clear that certain intelligence agencies had prior knowledge that there would be an attack by planes, and probably at the World Trade Center, or because it had already happened once. So maybe some of this prior knowledge actually kept some more destruction from occurring, although it's hard to imagine. It took them like an hour and a half to get jets up, so there probably won't come another opportunity like that for destruction, hopefully. In part 2, we're going to move west and look at the western connections to the Mothman phenomenon. In part 3, we're going to come back to West Virginia, and when I do, I want to just sort of set the stage for that. Here's a picture of my mother and her sister having a fun time there on the Poker River. Poker River is a tributary of the Kanawha, and therefore qualifies as a potential waterway or route for this phenomenon. And one of the things I remember from my mom living on this Poker River was that she had a lot of visitations by owls. Particular owls actually nested and spent the evenings in her yard, and this went on for years. Further up the Poca, and this is something I need to verify, and I will do that during the Mothman Festival, is that the family farm, that my mother grew up on here, is right next to a place called Rippling Waters, a famous watering hole. And this waterway at the bottom, I believe it's Haynes Branch, and I believe it's a tributary of the Polka. So and I'll check that, but I believe, it's highly likely that this waterway is also a connector in this grid, this Mothman grid. Somewhere I have a photograph of this church right near the family farm, where my mother says that when they were kids they saw a UFO floating above it. Yeah, and that's an interesting lead to follow. Perhaps the phenomenon was following my mother, who, by the way, grew up very close to Harriet's mom. Here we have an article in a practically destroyed Scientific American, which talks about, are you a hologram? The cat got a hold of this. Quantum physics say the entire universe might be a hologram. In fact, they go so far as to say in here that even though we live in a three-dimensional universe, we actually are experiencing it two-dimensionally, and holograms are essentially two-dimensional, yet give the appearance of three-dimensional. So physics is starting to say that what you're seeing in front of you could be a delusion, and very likely might be a delusion. Here we see how it appears that here's a better. It appears that one's experience is the things that we're perceiving are like they're on the skin of reality. They happen on the skin of reality. What's happening inside reality? There's a lot of just space. As the Buddhists say, we are made up mostly of, and science has shown we are mostly made up of empty space. And in a way, if you think about how division works, two-dimensionality is even though things appear, and I can say this as a photographer, three-dimensional, when I'm photographing, I'm accessing a part of my mind that sees two-dimensionally. So I know from my own experience that seeing two-dimensionally is an important tool. I guess the rub is that we don't want to become convinced that the solidness of three-dimensional reality is permanent, and which might lead us to believe that the Mothman phenomenon was made up or couldn't really happen. Well, it can happen, and physics is starting to show this. Okay, here's another Scientific American article or issue. I didn't get a chance to read the whole thing, but I just started reading about this exploration of using electromagnetic frequencies to change human behavior. They're coming up with pulses, little modules that they can use to pulse a signal through your brain, which will enhance one's work performance. And of course, the corporations would just love to have this. They could use it for any job that stresses people out to the point where they become very tired. This device could be used to temporarily speed them up. It's sort of like a speed. It's like an electromagnetic speed. And they talk a bit about the history of this kind of experimentation. Well, I mean, they don't really talk too much about the experimentation because that would have to entail talking about how those experiments were done. The history, as discussed in this magazine, doesn't go back much more than 1985. They don't really talk, even though they admit that this kind of research has been going on since the turn of the century, meaning the early 1900s. There aren't any details about what went on, and of course during that time period we have the whole Nazi experimentation, just all kinds of various experiments to see how to affect the mind with the various electrical things. The Nazis were really big on it. And then following the war, a lot of these scientists came to the U.S. and this sort of experiment, and Japanese doctors came over, and a lot of this sort of experimentation was done by our own government. And actually, it appears that some of this experimentation may have been done on people who are UFO experiencers. I just heard a recent interview with Walter Bauert, who's one of the pioneers of mind control research, wrote a great book, just a powerful book,
in the 1970s called Operation Mind Control, which has informed a whole generation of researchers about the various ways that government has experimented on people trying to change their perceptions. And a lot of this, experimentation was going on in the 50s and 60s during the height of the various flaps, UFO flaps. There are some people now coming forward to say that their experiences weren't alien in nature, that there were actually military folk involved. And so it just makes us it makes us all pause a minute and think about our own experiences and the experiences of others. It's always important to try to get a feel for, was it a man-made event or was it a natural event? I think in Point Pleasant it's certainly true that both were going on. It's clear that some of this stuff is coming from another dimension, whether or not that it may have been caused by man-made influences, like if the town had been bombarded with electromagnetic frequencies, it might have caused people to sort of lapse into these situations where paranormal events manifested. So it's important to sort of look at those issues, and Walter Bauer is now saying that UFO research is actually the cutting edge of mind control research. If you really want to get to the heart of what's making mind control technology tick today, he says look at the UFO phenomenon. So it's a little bit open as to what is really going on, but now we're seeing the fruits of a lot of this experimentation coming out in of course, ways that would just be good for making money, unfortunately. There is also some interesting stuff in the UFO Roundup from this week, September 3rd, 2003, big blackout in London. Another article is this one regarding another UFO being seen over the northern Ohio area where the blackout, the big New York City blackout started. We go into this a bit in the second segment of this series. Mothman curse topples a bridge in India. Right after the premiere of the Mothman prophecies down there was a big bridge collapse. And lots of interesting things going on every day. Here's an article that caught my eye. It's the June 76 Playboy with a chilling interview with Sarah Jane Moore. The real reason I tried to kill President Ford. I've read this article and there's never a real reason given. It just seems as if Moore has some really big secrets. Actually, she does divulge a few things. She basically says that she was set up by the FBI, that Squeaky Fromm helped set her up. And Playboy asks, why hasn't your version of events been more widely publicized? And Moore says, I get so mad. I made statements and nobody printed them. Are the members of the press forgetting that many of them have in the past told me I was sensible, reliable, accurate, honest, and reasonable, even likable? I guess earlier, Moore had actually gotten a lot of press for her activities. She says, to badly paraphrase Shakespeare, is it that the mistakes and frailties of men live on in the press, while the good is often interred beyond recall? There are 2 or 3 things I feel I ought to say to people, particularly about the callous, deliberate, manipulative techniques of the FBI, whose agents are not, as I had always believed, impartial investigators, but instruments of political action, using people as expendable tools for the repression and harassment of honest dissenters. I wrote a poem about the FBI. I'd like to read it to you. Said the FBI, you are a mother, help us. If they truly love the people, how can they deliberately cause such anguish? Said the FBI, you are a patriot, help us. If they truly love the people, how can they deliberately cause such chaos that tears at the very fiber of our community? Said the FBI, you are moral and Christian, help us.
Well, if they truly love the people, how can they steal and kill and bomb? So I went out among the people as your agent, to look for the kidnappers, to look for the killers, to know the thief, to find the bombers. And I heard from the kidnappers, who even in their running had a message of concern and love for their brother, not knowing he was being a Judas to protect his own child. And then they died in flames, your flames. You are parents, and yet you killed and overkilled. Where was your concern for the anguished mother or innocent kidnapped victim? You are the killers, killers of hope, killers of freedom, killers of children. You, smug, protective, and self-righteous. Yes, I learned to know those you call thieves, who take back for the people that which was torn from them, first with whips, then with oppression, in the name of progress through profits. And finally, I found the bombers and embraced them as comrades, and now with flames we speak our love and our hate. Perhaps Sarah Jane's poem says a lot more than she was able to say in her interview. But while the Mothman phenomenon can bring concern and anguish and warnings of impending doom, remember that prophecies are meant to be wrong. And if we begin to recognize prophecies for what they are, as tools, we shall truly survive. On this disc, so I'm blasting in from the future. This is 2005 December. I'm coming in for 3 minutes of extra stuff. I wanted to show this image of the supernatural bird on top of the Bigfoot. Speaking of Bigfoot, the Tlingit believe that the Bigfoot uses the baby's cry. It can mimics the baby's cry. It throws hypnosis at people and takes people's souls that way, can make people want to become a Bigfoot, and that this means that when you hear this baby's cry, that there's going to be a death in the family. This kind of thing happened when I was in the 60s, late 60s in West Virginia. I heard this cry. I had many dreams of the Bigfoot being outside, telepathically communicating. We had several deaths in the family around that time. In this article, Paranoia Magazine, Conspiracy Reader, actually it was 13 years, not 13, but 10 years from when Harriet left to when I saw her again in 1981. She left in 1971, and it says here that 1971 was the year that President Nixon announced the Army's biowarfare laboratories at Fort Detrick will be converted to cancer research. And they started something called the Special Virus Cancer Program. It ran from 1964 to 1977. Allegedly, AIDS came out of this research. According to this article, basically they were doing experiments on people without their knowledge, and coupled with Major Downing's assertion that military families are being used for experimentation using radiation, cancer, etc., etc. It's clear evidence that around the time that my dad was stuck and jabbed and grew a malignant tumor where he was jabbed. He woke up in the middle of the night, he was jabbed, didn't know who'd done it. This is a clear indication that this could have been coming straight out of this Army warfare base in Maryland, which is exactly where Harriet moved to in 1971. And her dad was, again, working on another secret project there. By the way, the author of that article, Dr. Alan Cantwell, Jr., also Leonard Horowitz is a good resource on these nefarious research experimentation things being done to people against their will. The other thing, December 21st, 2005, my wife, who never has any of this stuff happen, she's a total non-believer. She's driving down in an area where the Indians used to live. She sees a guy who looks like a guy that she knew as a kid who died. He's crossing the street. He looks the same age. He looks at her. They make eye contact several times. She calls the guy's brother, who's still alive, and says, "Hey, thought I saw your brother." And he goes, "Well, today's the day he died, many years ago." "And what time?" She said, "Well, it happened around noon." "Well, that's the time he died." So here we have my wife seeing not an MIB, but a dead person.